Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for your purpose, your power, your journey to authenticity. And today, my guest is Ilene Marcus, and I love your background, Ilene. I love the color pink, and it looks like a fry pan back there. And boy, I think I have a lot of frustrations frying on a fry pan right now. Um, what I love learning about you through Podmatch is that you know, or you figured out a way to take frustrations and turn them into something more positive. And I can't speak for men. I can speak for a lot of women because I work with a lot of women. Um, our day is just full of frustrations because we've been brought up to believe that we're supposed to be able to fix everything. We're Dr. Mom, we're our husband's nurse, we are our neighbor's caregivers. We do it all. And yet we become very frustrated. So, how did you get into this theory of turning frustration into something transformative? And give us a background.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here because that is such a good question to lean into. And you hit the nail on the head. We all get frustrated, then we get annoyed, and then we get angry, whether we want to admit it or not. Annoyance is a gateway to anger, which means frustration is a gateway to anger, which means that we're not reacting from a place of our best selves. And I spent a lot of years being angry, right? If only it worked this way, if only this one listened, if only this one happened. So I eventually realized that the only person I was hurting was myself. And I think, I've listened to several of your shows. I think that's a big aha for most of us. Some of us get it earlier in life. You youngins, listen, try to get it now. But when you realize, a lot of people, my kids' generation, watched that show, The Princess Bride, when Bazzini killed himself, right? He drank the own poison. And that's what we do. We think we're outsmarting the other person, but we're really cutting off a piece of ourselves. And I think I lived with it way too long. But the frying pan is a really good place to start. I have one here. I can show you. It is
very good.
Can you? Oh, I have a background so you can't see it. I'll have to fix that.
Whoa,
there we go.
Sorry. Yeah.
Unbalanced frying pan, just like me. So I moved into this house. The stove was crooked. The stove kept on getting crookeder. Everybody's asking me very obvious questions, which I don't know about you, Karen, but for me, when people ask me obvious questions, I get more annoyed because what am I, an idiot? No, like I didn't think of putting shims under it. Oh, I didn't think of getting some bricks. Oh, of course I thought of all that. Of course I called a handyman. But those old stoves just kind of disintegrated into themselves with the swivel feet. No matter what you did, it kept on falling. So my stove was always crooked. And I was getting frustrated. And one day I just said, wait a minute. Like I solve problems for thousands of people. That's what I do in life. So I looked at it and I said, aha. And I took the thick chicken cutlets and I put them on the side of the stove that was closer to the heat. And I put the thinner ones up. And what do you know? They cooked at the same time and neither burnt. And then I said, wait a minute, I want to cook onions and zucchini, but the zucchini always burns. And I'd like to put in a load of laundry or run and do something. I don't want to have to babysit the stove. That's annoying. So I put in two different things at the same time that require different temperatures, one closer to the flame, one further, and it worked. And I started cooking like that. And things, I think one of the things about turning fear into, or turning frustration into fuel, or turning fear from frustration into fuel, is you have to be willing to expect the unexpected. So what I didn't expect was things got a really nice char because all of a sudden on the slant, the things up here don't have the oil. So they're getting nice and brown while the things down here are cooking in the oil. So all of a sudden, like certain things are cooking really nice. Sausage, even my broccoli is getting a nice little crisp, And what do you know? I got a new stove and it was flat. And I said, isn't that funny? The thing that drove me crazy for 10 years, now I miss. So I set out to create a frying pan that mimicked that sliding stove. And I have to brag a little. Yesterday, by the Story Exchange, I was named one of the 15 brilliant business ideas of 2006.
I
So
love
it's the Ilene pan, and why do they have to be flat? Why can't you cook at different temperatures? Why is it all about the stuff, the size? Well, as women, we know it is all about size. No, I'm joking. It is about size, but it is about finish. But why can't it be about the angle of the pan? And that's what I set out to solve.
so when we come across this frustration, it's because I believe it's because we just expect things to work, things to have a real easy answer. So, such as with your stove, oh, we should be able to go down there and fix a little feet on it and it's going to balance up. I have a stove too that is totally off balance, has been for years, and the feet are working, except what happens is my floor is soft underneath the stove. And so anytime you put anything on it, it starts to lean. Um, I never figured out, I like the idea of the angle pan. I'm going to have to try that because, um, you're right. Some things get burned and some things don't even get cooked properly. But I always expected my husband or my handyman to be able to fix these things. And when they couldn't, it would get me very upset. It'd be like, well, they're supposed to be smarter than me. Because isn't that what we assume, women, that the men are smarter? They know these mechanical things. And yet we've got that brain power. So why aren't we using it more often?
Well, I think, I'm thinking we're of the same generation that we were brought up that we need to be taken care of and that, we're there to sit and to not really talk about who we are or show who we are, stay under the radar. When you talk about backstory, both of my family history is both sides of my family survived the Holocaust in different ways. One side fled from Poland, Germany, so they were always very meek because they ran away. They felt guilty about it. All of their siblings and family died, and they survived, so they had survivor's guilt. On my father's side, they survived the camps and they were very angry. So, like, neither was good, right? But, and we were taught because of that experience to fly under the radar, not open your mouth, not say what you think, not stand out, and that's a hysterical perspective, and it's valid. But the journey of becoming who we want to be is about deciding what to take from your family of origin, what to leave, and what doesn't sit right with you. And I can't tell you to this day, and I wish I could say it differently, including 6 months ago, I hire people. I mean, I've ran multi-million organizations. I've built a book. I've built this. I've lived in 3 homes. I still hire the wrong people because we want to believe. And I'm really trying to come down on the side of if someone tells me they can do something and I trust them and I hire them, they can't, not shame on me, shame on them.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and if they take money from me that wasn't theirs, that'll haunt them. I hope. No, but let's be honest about that. But you know what I'm saying. But it's true. We can figure out anything. And I think what you're also talking about is asking the right questions and being able to find the right people. Because even if it's not a husband or a handyman, is it a neighbor? Is it a friend like you and I talking? Oh, I have a crooked stove. Let me try the pan. Let me try something else. Before I built this pan on the other stove, I took my frying pan out to the fire pit and I tried to warp it so that it would go to the crooked stove. So I
I,
was trying to, so we try things and we see if they work. But I think the key thing is that I don't think we were put on this earth to be miserable. And anytime we are miserable, we have to look at, I've been listening to Eckhart Tolle, so I don't want to tell his story. Everybody knows who he is, right? The Power of Now and New Earth. But I've just been listening to him, and he said, it's not your life that's bothering you, it's your life circumstance. And he's right. It wasn't my life, it was my stove. And as long as I can isolate, it's this one thing right now, I can walk away from it, I can laugh about it. I can try something outrageous like a crooked frying pan and see where that takes me. So I think, it's about in the moment. And I think, everybody has a book and a system and a way and a duh. That's the story these days. And I say, pick the one that works for you. My message is just know when you're in it and do something different. I don't care who you pick to fix it and what method, just know when you're right in the middle of it. And that's how you turn, frustration into fuel.
Well, I love your message for a very special purpose right now. So we're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. And that is about 4 months ago. I think it's 4 months. I've also lost track of days. I lost my husband of 42 years. And my husband was my best friend. There were some times I thought he was a better friend than he was a husband. But we depended on each other for so many things. And he taught me where my strengths were, which I cannot thank him enough for that, because I didn't realize I had strengths when I first met him. And he just started pointing them out, and it'd be like, oh, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And what I've learned in the last couple months is we all have that strength to survive, whether it's that crooked, frying pan, if it's the door latch that doesn't want to stay closed. We can find ways to get these things fixed, but we have to take a step back and look at it and say, do I want to make the change? And obviously, when you made that frying pan, you wanted to make the change. You didn't want to stand there and be frustrated all the time that things weren't cooking properly. So what can I do? Oh, I can make half up here, half down here. Hey, that's not a bad idea. But how can I even make it easier? Oh, I'll create a new frying pan. Now, not all of us are going to create a new frying pan. I get that. But we can create new methods. And that's what your message really is, that stop feeling miserable. Stop feeling sorry for yourself because your stove isn't working.
Well, let's go back, because obviously my deepest thoughts are with you and how brave you are. 4 months ago, your hair is washed, you're showing up, you look good, and you're grieving. And, we have to honor that, because we're going to have that ebb and flow in life. But it all goes back to me, to Shakespeare, who I did not like, and I still haven't really understood. But, as sure as the day follows the night, things are going to evolve. The sun's always going to come up, and we're always going to have a new chance. Now, you are very blessed, if you don't mind my saying, and I don't use that word lightly, that you had a partner very early on that really gave you that. And that's what I call, when people say, what do you really do, Eileen? I'm like, I'm a cheerleader. And they're like, you don't look like a cheerleader type. I'm like, right, but I am. I am rooting for you to do what you need to do, be independent, be motivating behind you, support you, build you up. That's what I do for entrepreneurs. That's why I got into this. I was going around the country supporting entrepreneurs, building their businesses. And eventually I said, wait, I don't know if I was doing that if I wouldn't have made the connection. But the point is, you found that support network early. You found someone that did that. So one thing you really need is your people that are telling you yes. For years, I surrounded myself around people that said no. So a little more backstory, right? You said, oh, you just created a frying pan. Well, no, right? I knew it didn't work. I got the new stove and I was like, okay, I can fix it. And then I remembered something from years ago. When I was in high school, I was a swimmer, and we used to wear drag shorts, like the tight shorts every woman. And not everybody had them now, but the Lycra tight shorts. So we could, when we took them off, we were lighter in the water. And I was always the girl with a little heft, and my thighs rubbed. And I always wore those shorts, under my dresses, under my skirts, whatever, so that my thighs didn't rub. And then Sarah Blakely finds Spanx. She worked hard, I'm not going to say she didn't, and makes millions and millions of dollars basically selling Lycra shorts.
Yeah.
I realized I didn't have those cheerleaders. I was embarrassed about my legs rubbing. No one told me, don't just solve the problem for you. You can solve it for everyone. That's what Sarah did, right?
Yep.
She had a problem. She solved. So I said, this time I'm not just making the frying pan for me. I bet if I have this, and I did research and validation, if I have this crooked stove, other people, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. Let's not call it twice, let's call it 8 times, but eventually girls got to learn, and so that's why I really created the stove, because I did not grow up with people, oh, you're too, they would tell me, you're too bossy, you're too this, that, why make trouble, just leave it alone, make it work. So this creating the frying pan was a real step for me, in that instead of listening to all those voices we talked about that have validity for whatever reason in the past, but moving forward don't, I stepped into creating the frying pan. And I think, you're very blessed that you had a husband that was this person for you. And now you have to find it within yourself and find new friends that give you what he gave you. But the point is, people talk about finding your tribe, and this is what they mean. My tribe before this, or my family, was like, that's not going to work, or why make trouble, or let's go to the bar and drink. Don't spend time on that. Those are not the voices I want in my head. Right. So when you want to turn frustration into fuel, you have to be around people who say, we can fix that. There's a better way. Let's think about it. It's got to be simple. That's who you want around you. So it really does go back to your circle of influence.
It's interesting because yesterday I was having a conversation with somebody who's very, very special to me. And she was sharing a project that she's working on with her children. And they're young adult children. And she's telling them how she wants to pursue it. And they both looked at her and said, Mom, it's not going to work. And she said, well, why not? And they said, Mom, come on. You're not going to do that. Who are these people that are going to get behind you and support you in your idea? And she said, I'm already making those contacts. I can do it. And as she was sharing this with me, I said, your kids don't have to agree with you, but you do have this new community of people who do agree with you. Those are the people you need to work with.
Exactly.
I said, they may come up with some reasons too why this isn't going to work. But if in the initial beginning, you have this camaraderie with them, you then can hear what they have to say and why they're saying it. And she goes, I never thought of it that way. I said, because your idea may have some flaws in it, because we all have flaws. But now you have this new community. And she said, thank you for saying that. And I said, well, as supportive as my husband was all these years, my two sons were basically the same way, like, haha, look what Mom's doing. And now all of a sudden, it's good for you, Mom. You didn't listen to us. And no, I didn't. Because if I wasn't going to succeed, it was going to be because I chose not to succeed, not because you didn't believe in me. And I think that's where you sort of made that change. And when you talk about those voices, Ilene, we all have them. So anybody who's listening and says, are you too crazy? Did you hear voices? Of course we hear voices. Our mother telling us things, our grandmother, our fathers, our school teachers, our friends. It's all in this brain. And every once in a while, we get this repetitive play that says, that's stupid. Why would you do that? And you got to know where it's coming from and know how to answer it. And obviously you did. You said, I can do this.
Yeah. And you're also talking about, my other thing, that in the past it was black and white, right? You're saying no, cut you out bad. You're saying yes. No, I love that you made, especially with children and adult children, we know this as we get older, they are a mirror into ourselves. They learn what they live. And it's really hard for them to see us as someone different than we are, right? And they make that twist too, like you just said. So like, it's about, not not, it's about, loving, my daughter calls it, ma, don't yuck my yum, but right, it's about loving those people that are yucking your yum and saying, why do you see it different, like your kids did, your sons? Let me see why you see that, let me learn. And it's about having those conversations instead of automatically cutting off and saying, that's done, that's done, that's done. So I think that's another really big part of it. And you're right, you have to have those naysayers, but the point is, you have to know when to say, they don't get it, I'm not listening. For a lot of years, like you said, because someone had a degree or they were wealthy or they had a certain position, I gave them much more power about myself. And now I realize, no, that's from their perspective. Only I have my perspective and only I can do it. And I love what you said. And only I can choose not to succeed. And I was at a hackathon. Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
So I was at a hackathon with in Poughkeepsie, New York, Monday. It was great. Hudson Valley hackathon, 70 students from 7 different schools. And there was 2 girls that didn't want to get up and pitch, which is how people share their ideas. And, I I grew up in Long Island, another problem, but I grew up, and I said, I took a Wayne Gretzky, who was a famous hockey player, quote, and I said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that's what you're saying. If I don't at least try, and that's taken me a long time to understand, we all are going to fail, and I got to tell you, I had a lot of wins and then a lot of failure. So I was pretty blessed in life. But at a certain point, I realized if I don't do this, I can sit there and say Sarah Blakely did it, but I couldn't. No, I have to try the frying pan, because you're only going to be mad at yourself. And, we learn as we get older, we only regret the things that we didn't try.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up age to a degree, because we're never too old to succeed. I worked with a woman a couple of years ago who had started an organization in San Francisco, and it was for women of all ages. And the whole concept was, we're going to get rid of ageism because we all have the ability to live our life to the fullest extent. And I remember I interviewed another woman, and the woman said, well, my life is sort of over. And I said, why is your life almost over? And she said, well, I'm in my 70s and I'm in a wheelchair because I can't walk properly. And I have arthritis in my hands. And I said, let's not talk about what you can't do. Let's talk about what you can do. And she said, well, but I can't do. And she kept repeating, I can't do. And I said, so can you get around in your wheelchair? Yes. Oh, so you can get around. I said, the arthritis in your hands, can you use a computer? Oh, yeah, because when I'm moving my fingers, they feel great. I said, oh, so you can communicate. We went through a number of things, and every time she said yes, it was, you are succeeding. This has nothing to do with your inability. These are your abilities. And if we start realizing that if we use our abilities, we have a full life ahead of us. It may be different than what we expected.
Well, you just talked about my method all the way through, right? Like, she didn't know how to take that challenge and turn it into an opportunity, right? Instead of being frustrated, she was around people who were saying all you can do is sit there. And I call this, didn't want to find a way in. She wanted to stay on the outside. She wanted to say, poor me, I can't do anything. And, I think what's interesting about that story you just told is that thinking is not just pervasive in someone who is 70 years old and arthritis with a wheelchair. There are, like these girls I met who are juniors in high school. Oh, my parents, I don't know, I'm shy. We all think at each stage that there are barriers that really are in our own mind. And it's really about changing one little thing or one little step, or having like me whispering in the girl's ears or you whispering in her ear. And, I always talk about that analogy. If you just take one step in 30 days, you're facing a whole new direction.
Oh,
One step a day. You don't have to move all around. One step a day, a little turn, a little degree, and all of a sudden you're halfway around the circle, right? Facing a new direction. And I go around the country talking to entrepreneurs about how to start and scale a business. And a lot of people say, I really want to do a business, but I'm not sure what I do. And I say to them, what is something you're in this wheelchair right now, right? There is something that you're saying, if only I had a hook for my pocketbook, if only there was a different way of putting a brake, if only I had high heel feet to step into in the way, whatever it is.
right.
You are actually an expert now in living this way. What would you build? I always go back to those little plastic pizza top boxes we all know, which don't really exist anymore because now they use thicker cardboard. But someone said, I'm so sick of my pizzas being ruined with the cheese, and made millions and millions on a little device so the pizzas could be developed. That woman is in the place to develop something that can help everybody else in that situation.
Exactly. Exactly. So you talk to large groups of people. And when you're talking to a large group of people, at least when I'm listening to somebody who's up on stage, it's like, I just want to jump on stage with you and go, yes, yes, you understand me. What is the reactions that you're getting, and how are people learning from you?
I talked about the hackathon yesterday, which I've done that event maybe 3 years in a row. And yesterday or Monday was the best because I'm at a point now, I think also, age, Eileen Pan lesson, that everything is inclusive. I let them yell out. I want them to scream. I give them the ideas. It's all about engagement. It's about them coming up to me after and saying, I had this idea, or can I call you? So I think where I used to be so focused on showing you what I knew, now I'm really focused on hearing from you what you need. And I think that's been a huge switch, even in the energy of the audience. If they don't come to me, going to a mentor, going to another person that's there, going to another leader. So I think that's something I was putting out. And, I've always gotten a lot of requests for help after, but it's different this time because I'm really focused on, why don't you show me what you want and need? And we really go down that path. One of the things that happened on Monday was we always have a plan for an event, and then the students show up, and I have to read the energy as the facilitator. I have to read the energy of the room very quickly and pivot. And that's something that I used to feel like, oh, I promised the organizer, oh, the Association of Computer Science Teachers expect this. But I'm learning, no, that's why they hire me. And I've got to do that. And we pivoted, and boy, did it work, because we went to a more engagement model, got them more up. Because last year, they were all very shy, and we had to have the mentors choose ideas. This year, 20 kids out of 70 got up and said their ideas. So it was like, yay. So we opened it up. I hope that answers your question.
It does, because that's what I feel when I'm going and I'm listening to somebody like you. It's like, I want to hear what you have to say, but I also want to hear what the person next to me, how they're reacting. And I want people to know what my reaction is. Even if my reaction is negative, I want somebody to be able to explain to me like why theirs is positive, because it gives you that opportunity to look at your own challenges. What is keeping me from absorbing what Eileen's saying right now? Oh, I know what it is. It's those old voices telling me I'm just not good enough to do this.
Right. Or it's beliefs, right? Like you were taught girls don't do this. Or I'll tell you, when I started the frying pan, I can't tell you, I started talking to inventors and stuff. Metal doesn't work that way. You can't do that. How many people told me it couldn't be done, which, I was like, oh, I got to do it more. But right, it's that the old beliefs or the old voices, look, people are making money as influencers on TikTok. Who saw that coming, right? Like everything is new. And, you have to know. Now, that doesn't mean, you go down a road, you have to read the signs, because sometimes you're down the wrong road. And it doesn't mean, like with me, I got to a point where I made the first prototype, and it was like, Well, you probably can't see it, but I made a first
There he
prototype
goes. Yeah.
and it was solid. So when we went to make it in metal, it was like 7 or 8 pounds. Now I do have arthritis in my hands. How am I lifting a 7 or 8 pound
Right.
frying pan? I'm not. So I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out okay, so the method worked and I got the different temperatures, but it wasn't viable. So, like you said before, you're not going to get it the first time out of the box. And that's the other thing, right? Like live in a world of instant gratification. And you have to figure out if you want to invent, if you want to turn your frustration into fuel, right? Like the no is just another reason to do a yes, right? There's the old story about Thomas Alva Edison when people say, oh my God, it took you 99 tries to get the light bulb right. He's like, no, 99 experiments to learn, right? Once again, perspective. Am I getting closer or am I getting further away? And do I want to be on this journey or do I want to abandon it? And I think, that's a really big frustration into fuel for me. I think I always quit too soon because I wanted that, immediate gratification, or I needed to make money, or I needed this to happen. And now I've really learned, like, what are the small, subtle signs? How do I stay the course? And that's a big part of it. Not everything. And I'm sure you found this, especially in your last 4 months, without your best friend. Like, it's going to be a few steps forward and several steps back, a few steps forward. Like my yoga teacher says, some days the right is just different than the left, right? Like, why, I'm doing this yoga. Why aren't they balanced? They're not. So, the axiom that acceptance is the problem to all our answers, problems today, and then we can move forward from there. But you have to know that it is not going to be a straight line. And if you expect a straight line, you're already starting out in failure.
Well, growing up, my father, my grandfather, my father, my brother, they were all writers. And every time I would write something, my father would just look at me and go, honey, leave it to the men in the house. And he never tried to teach me because for him, my brothers, his father, it just was very natural. They came up with words and it was beautiful. Well, when my father passed away, I was asked if I wanted to give a eulogy. And I said yes. And I sat down and I wrote something. And when I gave it, my brothers and my mother said to me afterwards, how did you do that? Where did that come from? I said, it came from my gut. And my brothers looked at me like there was something wrong. Like, how could this happen? Like, you couldn't have written that. And I said, but I did. And if you think about everything else I've written in the past, it wasn't for my gut. It was for a school project. It was for, something, nothing that really meant anything to me. This meant something to me. And that's when I started writing and realized, okay, my dad was wrong, but it's because he hadn't seen it. And so now I know he hears my words because I speak to him all the time. And sometimes I go, ha ha, look what I just wrote. But it came with frustration. And the frustration said, I'm going to figure out a way to do this because Dad can't write it for me anymore. He's not here. So guess what? I got to do it myself. And that's a choice we make. And it doesn't mean we're going to be perfect at it.
No,
it's a choice.
But it's also you were passionate about it. You, like you said, the others you were doing to check off, a box or a list. I wrote my report. I did this. They write. I want to write. When you had the chance to write about your father, even though you didn't feel good about how he talked to you about a writer, you were passionate about it. And that's it. Like, you have to decide. Like, I became passionate about the frying pan. I could have been passionate about the washing machine that didn't work, about my unleveled, something couch, but I wasn't. So a big part you just talked about is choice. You have to decide what you want to make room for. Do you want to make room? Is this where you want to spend your time and your energy? Does it mean something to you? Not because other people told you it should, not because you want to be a good girl and get it checked off, not because you want validation, but because internally from your gut, it means something. And that's what you found.
Absolutely. So how can my listeners find you? And also for those of us who have a stove that's not on balance and needs a leaning frying pan, how do we find the frying pan?
So my name is Ilene, ILENE MARCUS, Ilene Marcus. So you can find me, IleneMarcus.com. And the Ilene pan is ILEAN -pan. So I'm on Shopify. I have a store, soon to be on Amazon if I can figure out the rigmarole. And that's how you can find me, IleneMarcus.com. And ask questions about the fry pan, ask other questions. I have a blog, and I'd love to hear from you listeners and to keep in touch. This was amazing, Karen.
Thank you so very much. And I'm going to get that fry pan because I'm never going to get my stove level. And I can surprise my boys when they come to visit next month and make them something that actually comes out well. So love it. Have a great day. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.